What's up, Sterile Process Clean? We have got some exciting educational announcements today for you, and brought in a tag team of some educational gurus in this space you're probably familiar with, but we're going to start here with introductions, and then we're going to make you wait just a few moments longer to hear what it is that's coming out very, very soon into the space. Let me start first here with Lisa McKnown. Tell the folks who you are, Lisa, and what you do at Beyond Clean.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lisa McKnown, and I am the Manager of Research and Development for Beyond Clean. And so I handle a lot of curriculum development and really centering on building out education that is centered on critical thinking.
There's a lot of stuff that Lisa does in the background. It takes months and months and years to put together. So, we're out here doing podcasts, so we're just going to jump on and get right to the point. Well, Lisa is doing the hard work of all the research and all the literature reviews and everything it takes to really put some high quality and disruptive education together in this space. So we're going to be hearing a lot from Lisa today. But before we get into the specifics of the education, I want to introduce our other panelists here, Michael Matthews. Mike, who are you, and what's your role at Agiliti?
Well, hopefully, if anybody's been following Beyond Clean for any length of time, they're somewhat familiar with me. As you know, I used to be a co-host of the podcast for a little while. I think about 3 or 4 seasons, somewhere in there. But today I am the Director of Customer Education for Agiliti. And so I am totally focused on helping our customers utilize the information that we give them to make meaningful, impactful changes that result in saved money and saving stress on both the equipment and the people who clean the equipment.
And what's great about both of you guys is you've both got frontline clinical experience in sterile processing. That's where you started in this industry. And that heartbeat continues across the entirety of everything that you do, everything that you put together. And in particular, this project that we're announcing right now on this live stream. And without further ado, Mike, do you want to tell folks what it is we're talking about today? What's the big announcement?
Sure. So Agiliti has partnered with Beyond Clean and CCI to release a new microcredential that is focused on quality management services. And so this is all about improving healthcare through learning how to utilize data in order to create customized solutions for individual problems in healthcare facilities. This process has proven to be extremely valuable in other industries, but it's having a difficult time making its way into healthcare, and then even more specifically, making it down to the nitty-gritty of what goes on in sterile processing every single day. And so you're right, Hank, that experience that Lisa and I have, as well as all of you on the Beyond Clean crew, becomes critically important, because that's what we're talking about. It's how do you take data and make meaningful, impactful change, and then report those changes to the people who actually make the decisions.
Right. Yeah, this is a really big deal. Like if I was writing this in an email, it would be a lot of exclamation points, right? The second microcredential ever in the space. But before we get into the specifics of this, I want to turn it back over to Lisa and say, what is a microcredential? I know this is the second one that's in the space. Again, really new concept in SPD, but really, really powerful one in the industry at large, and healthcare at large, and all industries that deal with microcredentials. But what is that? How would you explain that to someone on the street?
So how a microcredential is different from a certification is that typically a certification is covering a multitude of topics and gives you kind of a broad overview of those topics in order to establish essential job focus. And then a microcredential, what that does is it takes one of those topics and it drills down and allows an individual to really focus on doing a deep dive of all of the breadth of that specific topic.
That's the way I've kind of explained it. Certification in general is very broad, and, a couple inches deep. And with these micro credentials, you get the opportunity, Mike, to really focus on one topic and go as deep as you can within that topic, making all the connections along the way. And so, one of the questions that I had for you, Mike, is you could do a micro-credential on any topic under the sun. I mean, literally any little sentence or chapter, or, sub-point in the credentials and the guidelines, just in everyday life and sterile processing, that could be a micro-credential. And yet you started this journey and you helped us start this journey with our second launch, specifically on the topic of quality management system. So why this one as opposed to everything else out there?
For sure. Hank, as a company, we love data, and we have just reams and reams of data related to specifically device failures and how they break and all that sort of stuff. And that's part of what we provide to our customers is, here is an explanation of how your devices break. Here's what's broke. Here's what we fixed. And the idea is that the customers take that information and then they implement change in order to see those repair costs come down. But in reality, we noticed that there's a gap there, that a lot of customers, they receive the data and they see the idea of making changes, but they don't really know how to do those changes. And having a very structured approach to that facilitates those meaningful changes. And then especially documenting those changes as they happen to then be able to report back to maybe an administrator or somebody and say, here's what we're doing to improve our costs. And a lot of that is not naturally, it's not intuitive to sterile processing technicians. It's definitely not intuitive as managers. I mean, Hank, you've been a manager. I've been a manager, and you know that you've got 1,000 things that are going on. And when somebody says, "Hey, here's this problem, go fix it," kind of like, okay, how? Like stop breaking stuff. Okay, great. How do I do that? How do I make those meaningful changes? And the reality is that if people don't sort of already know how to do it, it probably doesn't get done, or it doesn't get done in a meaningful and long-lasting way. Or if something is improved, it's never documented and therefore it's never reported. So that manager never gets to brag to administration and say, look at what we've done. And so when we think about those gaps between knowing what we ought to do and then actually doing it in a way that is reportable, that's where something like a micro-credential could become really, really helpful and important. And I think it's important that we focus on those things that equip our customers to make meaningful changes, because ultimately those changes and those improvements is what translates to better patient care.
Absolutely. Yeah. That patient care, that's a great place to end, because that's what was running through my mind the whole time. When you think about quality, that's what we're talking about. It's not that, we just want clean instruments. We want things not to break. It's like, yeah, we want those things, but we want them because there's a patient at the other end of this process. And Lisa, the quality management conversation is not a new one out there in the broader industry outside of healthcare. Even within healthcare, quality management is not a new concept. But to Mike's point, the level of content and education that this micro-credential is bringing forward is new. There's never been a curriculum as deep that really takes folks, from the entry level of, hey, this is the first time that I've heard of this concept, all the way down to that deep competency that these micro-credentials are built around. So can you talk about just kind of, high level, what does this curriculum entail? What are some of the themes and some of the things that folks should anticipate learning once they start this program?
Yeah. So first of all, just to piggyback off of what you just said, a lot of hospitals or hospital systems have like an executive team that is thinking about, quality management systems, and they have a quality manual and things of that nature. But at the granular level in the actual department, a lot of times, as Mike had mentioned, the managers, the frontline leaders, and even the technicians don't have a lot of experience with not only being introduced to some of these concepts, but using the tools. So with that disconnect there, this micro-credential was designed specifically with the frontline people in the departments who have an interest in not just their own personal work performance and quality, but thinking about the systems that support the quality that's produced in the work environment. And so the basic structure of this micro-credential, it's called Sterile Processing Foundations. in quality management systems. And so it lays the groundwork, helps people understand the terms and concepts that are related to quality management systems so that they can speak that language and understand what those terms mean. And then it gives them an understanding of the process approach to quality. And so that dives into the elements of a process. And it takes the focus then off of individuals and really looks at what are all of the elements within a process and how do those integrate together to produce the output. And basically understanding the essential job functions and skill sets that are required for quality control. And then there's an introduction to being able to analyze the historical development of quality management theories and how those theories are put into practice. So then with that, the other thing that I want to really emphasize in describing the way that this microcredential was developed is once you have that core understanding, like laying that groundwork, it's designed to give people an opportunity to apply what they're learning in a real world work environment. So you'll be evaluating real workflows within your own department using critical analysis to identify issues and then apply both the concepts provided in the curriculum and the quality management tools to demonstrate that competence. So the output of the projects is designed to provide value to the employers in a very tangible way.
Yeah, Mike, that's one of the biggest challenges in training or, getting training for yourself, but also training your staff is how do you know if they really get what they just, learned through the book or what they just heard in the conference? How do you know that actually got from their head to their hands? And like Lisa brought up, the practical structure of this microcredential program is to do just that, to go from head knowledge to hand knowledge and then see the implications in a department. Why is that such an important thing?
That was really one of the foundational values that we wanted to build out in the microcredential, because when you talk about quality management systems, they're everywhere and they're not hard to find information about. Like if you want to find broad information about, QMS or Lean Six Sigma, you can get on YouTube, you can take a class at a community college, you can take an online course. Like there's tons of ways that you can get this broad concept of quality management. But all of those are focused on usually manufacturing or something like that, completely different industries. And what we wanted to do was to take that very practical application and go from the theoretical to the practical, but make that practical, not in manufacturing, not even just in healthcare, but specific to the processes in sterile processing and the operating room are related to the flow of instrumentation and devices. Our company motto at Agiliti is every interaction has the power to change a life. And you may look at a sterile processing technician and say, well, they don't ever see patients, they don't ever touch patients. But the reality is every single instrument, every single device that they touch is going to be used on a real live patient. And so what we want is to have that broad theoretical information, which is important, but really drill it down to the technician at the table inspecting the instruments, the technician in decontam washing the device, those types of activities, because that's where we can really affect patient care. And that's where we can effectively save hospitals a lot of money by identifying broken processes and then allowing those customized changes to occur.
Yeah, one of the things I thought of as Lisa was describing, starting the foundational level, right? Defining the terms, going into what those things mean. And this kind of goes to what you said, Mike. As a new leader, especially as a new technician, like you hear these terms kind of thrown around, especially in like some of the big meetings, higher level meetings and stuff. And like, you're just sitting there shaking your head like you know what they're talking about, but you have no idea what they're talking about. And you're like, hopefully no one's going to find out that I'm not doing what you think I'm doing, or, that I don't understand what you're saying. But, getting that confidence level of, okay, now I know what that project was that this other department did, or now I know what they're asking me to do, next year to improve processes, to be prepared for Joint Commission, whatever else it is. That confidence then translate into, more of these practical outworkings, because you know what you're talking about now, you know what these projects look like, you know how to apply this knowledge that you're learning, And it's really, really powerful, especially at a time in our industry when all of these different intersections are coming together, right? We do have to cut costs, to your point. There's not infinite money. Everyone's looking for ways to save. But we also have these quality expectations now that is becoming harder and harder to meet because devices are becoming more complex. Not only the medical devices that we're reprocessing, but the equipment that we're using to do the reprocessing is also becoming complex. And so quality is always kind of ahead of us that we have to pursue. Developing this competency and this understanding of the systems that will get us there and the processes that will help us to manage that quality on the back end is so needed and so powerful, especially now.
Hey,
in SPD.
can I just tag on to something that you're saying? Like when you're sitting in that boardroom and people are using terms that you've never heard of and all this sort of stuff. Like I've been there, and the reality is that the administrators have almost like a different language that they're going to use because most of them have been to places like business schools where they teach things like quality management systems, and they're very familiar with terms like Lean Six Sigma and all their bizarre little terminologies that they use there. And that can be incredibly overwhelming. But what you'll find, though, is that once you know that process and once you know that terminology and you're able to speak back to them in those same terms, like it's going to elevate not just your personal status, but your department's status within the hierarchy of the hospital. And so it's really important to kind of know how to navigate those things and speak in a way that resonates with those decision makers in order to, affect new changes.
It's almost like a currency that you can spend with your administrators to get the credibility, which is very, very powerful, right? Because we're competing for capital funds with all these other departments. We're competing for operational budgets. We're competing for just attention from administrators for some of these big projects or big partnerships. So yeah, that currency and credibility, hugely, hugely important, especially if it's tied to quality, right? I don't think there's a bigger buzzword out there than quality. And if it's got implications on cost savings, on processes, on standardization, on accreditation, I mean, that's a win-win-win. So Lisa, on a practical standpoint, what is, maybe let's just start. What's the length of time that someone who signs up for this microcredential, how long should they expect to spend on it?
It's designed for roughly 10 hours of work, but it totally depends on the individual learning style of the person, because it really is set up like a miniature college course. So there is going to be, not just some written work and some reading to do, but then the projects. So those projects you're going to need to have some backing from your administrators, leadership, and then get approval to work on a project that then is a deliverable for the course. So,
and so I'm assuming this is what's called self-paced, right? So there's no semesters. You don't have to wait on like another class to start. You can sign up. You can start whenever you want, and then you got a window, I'm assuming, to complete that program.
That's correct. So CCI sets up those guardrails, and an individual has 3 months from the date that they enroll to actually complete the program.
So I should have done this at the beginning of the live stream, but I'm going to talk real briefly about who CCI is, because we talked about Beyond Clean, talked about Agiliti, but who is this CCI group that we're partnering with? Especially on the sterile processing side, we may not be as familiar with CCI as folks on the operating room side, but that group is the Competency and Credentialing Institute. And through CCI, they do a ton of stuff, very similar to Beyond Clean. They do research, they do training, they do education, but they also have accredited credentials and certification that they host for the operating room. So the CNOR certification, for instance, that's coming from the CCI group. They've also got like management certifications, got a couple of other nurse practitioner certifications. So a lot of credentialing education in this space. It's really the hub for perioperative education out there. And what's so cool is partnering then with us to build these kinds of micro-credentials. They're taking a big step, and they're putting a lot of time and effort into creating a collaborative space out there, not only for sterile processing professionals to get these micro-credentials, but anyone in that perioperative workflow. So this could be the surgeon, this could be the nurse, this could be the surgical tech, this could even be supply chain. Anybody that touches surgery can take this QMS micro-credential that we're talking about today and learn what we're talking about, because as we all know, these are not isolated systems. It's not a vacuum down in SPD. These things touch every aspect that's going out there in healthcare. So it's a really, really exciting place to be. Mike, this is obviously not the first time that most folks have heard of you, and probably not the first time that folks have heard of Agiliti, but in terms of the educational opportunities that Agiliti is a part of, this micro-credential, such a big deal, such a big announcement and launch, but y'all are doing a lot of other education in this space. Can you talk about that briefly here for us?
Sure. So most of our education is focused on care and handling of instruments and devices, because one of the gaps that we fully recognize is that somewhere around 80% of device damage is preventable through better care and handling. And it's easy to just say that, but usually how technicians hear that is, we'll just stop breaking stuff. We'll just do better, right? And that's not helpful at all. I remember very clearly as a manager when my biomed department would call me because I sent in a drill to be repaired, and they'd be like, "That drill cost thousands of dollars. Y'all need to quit breaking stuff." But there was no sort of like valuable information given of, okay, how? Believe it or not, we technicians are not just like throwing instruments back and forth to each other, like, oh, this goes in that side, just throw it over there, right? Like that doesn't happen. So the reality is that people are breaking stuff, but they don't know how they're breaking stuff. And so that's where our education is really focused in on, is care and handling improvements, and then auditing of your processes to understand where in your process those devices are most likely getting damaged. So we have an online learning platform called Agiliti U. It's just the letter u.agilitihealth.com, or you can get there through our website. And our continuing education on care and handling is open to anybody. Like, we don't restrict that just to our customers. And so you may look at this and say, hey, that's cool, I'd love to get that, but I'm not an Agiliti customer. That's okay. Just go to u.agilitihealth, and there's a whole sign-up process that you can go through, and we will give you access to those continuing education resources focused on care and handling. And then, of course, our process audit tools that are also available for free for anybody, because we think this is our responsibility as a company to help healthcare do better in meaningful ways, because that's what patient care deserves. And so all of those things are available, and they can integrate very well with something like a micro-credential, because once you audit your processes, you're going to want to know, how do I make these improvements? Well, that's where that micro-credential comes in as well. So all of these things are kind of weaving themselves into sort of like an ecosystem where you can really make tangible improvements to your bottom line that ultimately result in saved money, saved stress, and better patient care.
Yeah, we've heard tremendous things about those damage prevention audit forms that you reference. I know you've got a couple of different ones depending on the service side and such, but yeah, that's just such a great tool to bring into your facility with kind of a new set of eyes, and then start checking it off, see where the gaps are. And you didn't mention this, but you're also a presenter out there in the space. I know I see you all over LinkedIn, sometimes various cities, various hospitals doing education. And everyone always loves hearing from Mike. So you hadn't got a chance to bring Mike in. Make sure to reach out to him for that as well. I want to thank you, Mike, for the support that Agiliti has shown for this topic, quality management. Tremendously valuable, as we've been talking about today. So thank you for really going out of the status quo of traditional educational models and saying, hey, we're going to go deep, and we're going to provide those resources. Even the other things that you were kind of alluding to through Agiliti U, we're going to invest in the industry through these kinds of education. I want to express a lot of gratitude and thanks for that.
I appreciate that. And obviously we're big fans of Beyond Clean. It's kind of, it's almost in my DNA. I love this group. I love what y'all are doing. I love the research that Lisa is coming out with. And that forward thinking is where we want to be.
Of course, Lisa, we could not wrap without saying thank you for giving birth to these micro-credentials. And the concept in the industry, again, this is the first in the history of sterile processing, right? We've never had micro-credentials before. And finally, now we've got 2, and we're going deep in a lot of areas. We've got more in line that will be coming out here in 2024 as well. But, if you're interested in quality, this is it. And Lisa, thank you again for pouring yourself and your mind and your heart and your passion, your experience into this, because it is a behemoth undertaking that no one really knows until you see the inside of how long it takes to put this together. But really appreciate you doing that for us and for the industry.
It's just so satisfying to be able to put something out there and have it be received in a way that makes a huge impact. So that's one thing that just internally drives me to keep making challenging educational experiences. So,
well, that's the perfect way to wrap this, because that's what drives every single sterile processing tech out there. You don't stay in this business for the money. We all know that. We stay in it because there's something inside of us that knows what we're doing is so very important to patient care. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. And again, remind you how we do all the time at Beyond Clean.